Okay, so imagine a company that you totally trust. I mean, their stuff is probably in your fridge right now. Now imagine finding out that whole company was built on a lie. A lie so massive it left a multi-billion-dollar black hole in its wake. Well, that is the unbelievable story of Parmalat, and we're about to dive into how they pulled it off.
Right at the center of this whole mess is this number. Just look at it. 14 billion euros. That's not the company's value. That's the amount of money that was just gone. It's the size of the hole they found in the books. It had completely vanished into thin air.
So you have to ask, right? How in the world did a company known for milk and dairy products manage to build a house of cards so enormous that it fooled investors, auditors, and banks across the entire globe for years? That is the billion-dollar question we're here to answer.
To really get how deep the deception was, we've actually got to start at the end. We need to look at the exact moment when everything, and I mean everything, came crashing down.
And when it fell fast. The whole thing unraveled in just a few weeks back in December of 2003. It started when the auditors raised a little red flag. They just couldn't seem to verify the billions in cash Parmalat said it had. Then came the bombshell, the absolute smoking gun. A letter from Bank of America, supposedly confirming almost 4 billion euros in an account, was exposed as a complete, total fake. A few days after that, boom, the company was bankrupt.
And we're not talking about just any bankruptcy. At that moment, this was the single largest corporate collapse in the history of Europe. A company that seemed like a bedrock of Italian industry was gone, and the shockwaves were felt literally everywhere.
To really feel the impact of that shock, let's just rewind a little bit. Let's take a look at what Parmalat looked like to all of us on the outside, right before the whole thing imploded.
You see, on the surface, Parmalat was this incredible success story. It was a household name, a milk multinational operating in 30 different countries. It was pulling in over 7 billion euros a year. It looked like a solid, stable, family-run Italian giant led by its respected founder, Callisto Tanzi. Seriously, nobody suspected a thing.
So, how did they do it? How did they maintain that perfect image while hiding a black hole of debt? All right, let's pull back the curtain and look at the actual recipe for this record-breaking fraud.
When you boil it all down, the scheme was actually kind of simple, in a twisted way. First, they just made up money out of thin air. They created phantom sales to companies they secretly owned, basically pretending to do business with themselves. Second, they played a classic shell game, moving this imaginary money through a confusing maze of offshore companies to hide the very real debt. And the last step, the most brazen of all, to prove the money existed, they just faked the bank statements. They just typed them up.
And when I say a maze, I really mean it. We're not talking about a couple of fake companies. They used over 300 shell companies, tucked away in tax havens like the Cayman Islands. It created a financial web so tangled that it was almost impossible for anyone on the outside to figure out what was really going on.
This is what I mean by brazen. This is the heart of that fake Bank of America letter. It's a document claiming, yep, we confirm Parmalat has nearly 4 billion euros sitting right here. The only problem? The account they were talking about didn't exist. It was never real. Okay, so a lie that big, a fraud of that magnitude, it doesn't just disappear. It was bound to leave behind an incredible amount of wreckage, and it affected tens of thousands of real people.
I mean, this slide really says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you have the claim, the public image, a fortress of a company, flush with cash and assets. And on the other side, the cold, hard reality, a hollowed-out shell, collapsing under the weight of a 14 billion euro black hole of debt.
And the human cost here was just devastating. 36,000 employees suddenly had no job. Investors, from big institutions to regular people, saw their life savings just wiped out overnight. And thousands of suppliers and creditors who had put their trust in the Parmalat name were left holding the bag, completely stunned and unpaid.
So you have to wonder, where did some of this money actually go? Well, the founder himself, Callisto Tanzi, eventually confessed to personally embezzling a mind-boggling 800 million euros, and he spent it on things like personal luxuries and propping up his family's struggling soccer team.
As you can imagine, the legal fallout was massive, and it was fast. Top executives were arrested and convicted. They even put international bankers on trial. The whole scandal was such a national embarrassment that Italy basically rushed through a whole new set of corporate laws, focusing hard on one thing, making sure the auditors, the supposed watchdogs, could never, ever be this blind again.
But you know, even after all the arrests and all the new rules, the story of Parmalat left behind some really deep,
really uncomfortable questions that we're still grappling with today.
First, it makes you question the whole nature of these giant family-run empires. Is there a point where that emotional bond, that loyalty to family, becomes so strong that it just completely overrides basic financial common sense? Can it create the perfect environment for something like this to grow?
And then there's the really big one. What about the gatekeepers of the financial system? How did some of the most sophisticated banks and auditing firms in the world miss so many glaring red flags for so many years? You have to ask, were they just incompetent, or was something else going on?
And that leads us to the final and maybe most important question. All these new rules were put in place to stop this from ever happening again. But if you look at the corporate world today, have they really worked? Or is the next Parmalat-sized disaster just quietly waiting around the corner, waiting to be discovered?